Having a parent who is unhealthy emotionally and psychologically is one of the most difficult things to deal with. Some of us have to deal with some pretty traumatic situations when it comes to our parents, and thankfully there are some people such as myself who have had a really stable parent, right? A really stable, healthy mother who, while isn't perfect, has the ability to support and help you grow and help you change and help you learn. But for those who have had different parents and different experiences, the parent-child relationship could be pretty difficult. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about the paranoid and delusional parent. I get a lot of situations like this from people around the world, and I think it's proper and in place to insert a video into our series on this topic. Let's jump in. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For all of you who are subscribed and participating, and for those who are new, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button. And let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist, but I'm also licensed in mental health. And I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults within my private practice who are dealing with trauma. Let's go ahead and jump in. So I think it's proper and in place for me to kind of differentiate between delusions and paranoia. So I'm going to do that right now. So when we refer to delusions, I want you to keep in mind that delusions can be conceptualized as a strong conviction, okay? It's a strong conviction. It's a strong belief, an unmovable belief. It's a strongly held conviction or belief that cannot be unwired or broken apart or detangled, for lack of a better word, by facts, by truth. Okay, so I want you to kind of think of a delusion in terms of just this strong internalized belief that has become a part of the person. It's like a seed that is grown on the inside of the person, and it's really hard for that person to kind of unravel their emotions and their mind and their needs and their wants from that delusion. Now, there are some people who have delusions that are bizarre and some delusions that are non-bizarre. So what I mean by this is a bizarre delusion would be the FBI is watching me everywhere I go. They have bugs in my ceiling light fixtures. They have bugs in my garden watching me. They're also sending messages through my cable TV box, and they're also monitoring my activity online. Okay, so that is a bizarre delusion, because we know as common sense factual people that yes, the FBI can spy on you if you are a person of interest to them. But for a typical everyday person, that is not likely to happen. So we know that that delusion is a little bit bizarre. A better example of a bizarre delusion might be, aliens have been talking to me through various channels and they're coming to get me tonight. Okay, that's a really bizarre delusion. We all know that that's less likely to happen, I should say. Okay, now a non-bizarre delusion would be something like, I was pulled over by the police and the police are now following me. Okay, it's non-bizarre because we do get pulled over by the police, and there's a possibility that the police could be following you, especially if you have a warrant out for your arrest or something of that nature. Okay, so you want to be able to differentiate between the two. Is my loved one suffering, or is my parent suffering from a non-bizarre delusion, or are they suffering from a bizarre delusion, or are they suffering from a combination of the two, which is likely to happen? Now, there's two other kinds of delusions that you should be aware of. One is called the mood congruent delusion, and the other one is called the mood neutral delusion. Now, the mood congruent delusion basically says this: the person typically makes sense, and they're typically not this rigid and this temperamental, and their belief system or delusion is not as firmly tied up and knotted up, for lack of a clinical term, when they are not depressed, when they are not manic, when they are not showing symptoms of bipolar disorder. So here's what I mean. So sometimes delusions can be congruent with your mood. They can be dependent upon your mood. If you're manic, if you're bipolar, if you are schizoaffective, if you are dealing with mania, whatever the symptoms may be, and your mood is fluctuating and you're depressed and you're anxious and all of that, then you can start to have these really bizarre and non-bizarre delusions, okay? So some people really become delusional when they are depressed, when they are manic, when they are dealing with a period of, some psychosis with some mood issues or some mania. Now, the mood neutral delusion says this. Basically, the mood neutral delusion is, there's no dependency on how that person feels for that delusion to either exist or not exist. So in other words, your delusion is not based on how you're feeling. It's not based on lay bio moods. It's not based on psychosis. It's also not based on mania or some type of stress that you're feeling in the moment. It's just a delusion. It's not dependent on any of those factors, okay? So it's important to decipher between the two of those. Now, to make things more complicated, we can also throw in hallucinations. Now, hallucinations are more tactile experiences, more sensory-based experiences like auditory, visual, gustatory, sensory, right? A lot of people have delusions, of feeling things crawling on their body. Some people have delusions of hearing voices or hearing their name being called or hearing God speak to them in an audible voice, right? Not, I want to make sure that I clarify this, this does not include somebody that says something like, the Lord spoke to me yesterday and he told my heart to do this, that, the other. I'm talking about the individual who says, I spoke to God last night and this is what he told me audibly, and here's the conversation that we had, okay? And sometimes with hallucinations and delusions, there's these religious overtones, so that's important for me to point out as well. But most people with hallucinations, they do hear things. They will see things like crosses on the wall or demons or things crawling around, right? There's these bizarre experiences. And sometimes they will also see shadows and things like that, okay? I want to also add in here something known as shared psychosis. Now, some research refers to this as induced psychosis or induced delusions. And here's what happens. You have two individuals, one with a very powerful personality. The second one has a weak personality. The first one not only has a strong personality, okay, but they are also pretty psychotic. And they have these really unhealthy delusions, and delusions that are not non-bizarre. They're very bizarre. They are clearly unstable. They are clearly psychotic delusions, right? There's no basis in reality for these particular delusions. This strong personality influences a weaker vessel that is connected to them. And that could be a supervisee. If the individual is a supervisor, that could be a child. If the person is a parent, that could be an adult child with tons of guilt and trauma. If it's a parent, it could also be, a very weak-minded friend who's attached to the delusional person. They have this ongoing belief about something. Let's say the FBI is out to get them. And what they end up doing is sharing all of their beliefs with this weaker vessel. And this weaker vessel begins to believe as they do. It's almost like they take on the characteristics of the really, really sick person. And that's why it's called shared psychosis, because the individual doesn't have the ability to separate themselves from the sick person and say, okay, that's not okay. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. I'm not going to think that way, right? So they end up getting sucked in, and they get so sucked in that they can't detach from that psychotic delusion or belief system. So they start acting in the same ways as the delusional person. That is pretty sad. I talk a lot about shared psychosis right up here in this video if you want to check that out. It's pretty powerful. So let's talk about paranoia, because, that gets in here as well when it comes to a parent or a loved one with this particular disorder. Paranoia could be either a part of psychosis or a personality disorder. I talk about Cluster A personality disorders right up here in this video if you want to go back and take a look at that. But here's what's basically happening with paranoia. The individual kind of develops this hypervigilant disposition about life, and they don't trust anybody. If they do, it's brief, and if they do, it's usually after years, months, or a long period of time of really just staying away from other people. They really are afraid and apprehensive when it comes to emotional attachments, because again, at the core of who they are is a lack of trust. So when there's that lack of trust, then, you know, it's going to be really hard to attach to other people. So they have a pretty insecure and detached attachment style that becomes a part of their character, that becomes a part of their illness if they're psychotic. They tend to be reluctant to connect. They're unforgiving. They hold grudges. They may, really feel compelled to protect their territory and people that they love and care about, almost to a point of needing to be hospitalized, because they will do anything to protect what they feel they need to protect. They're often trying to be ahead of other people, and often really trying to make sure that they don't get trapped in something or caught in something or just really tied up. So they're closed off, so to speak, from connecting with anybody else or humanity. These particular individuals have attachment issues. They cannot attach in a healthy way, and they tend to isolate and withdraw out of fear. And again, this could be a psychosis that could be treated with medication, or it could be more of a personality disorder, which is a cluster A personality disorder, which I talk about in the video I pointed out earlier. So let's say you have a parent like this. What do? It's really hard to accept the reality that you have a loved one like this, because there aren't many answers, there aren't easy answers, and there aren't a lot of medications that are there to treat these individuals for long periods of time. You can take your loved one to a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, and they can become over-medicated. They could be under-medicated or improperly medicated, You can also have trouble with psychiatrists and psychotherapists who are moving around and they leave and new ones come in, and you have to bounce from one doctor and therapist to the other. You also may have some issues in trying to get this loved one to get the help that they so desperately need. So there's a lot of complications in here. What do you do? Well, I want to give you some suggestions. I have a lot of my clients and those who consult with me try this. I want you to get a piece of paper. I'm stuttering today, guys. I'm so sorry. It's just been a long day. Go ahead and grab a piece of paper. And I want you to write down these reflection questions, okay? Because when you have a loved one who is like this, when you have a parent who is like this, you really need to reflect. You need to do your own introspection and really figure out, how do I need to manage myself and this other person? You want to make sure that you are healthy and that you're managing this correctly. So here's the first reflection question, okay? The first reflection question is, what am I dealing with? What am I dealing with? The reason you want to ask yourself this is you want to make sure that you look at all sides, right? Am I dealing with psychosis? Am I dealing with a personality disorder? Am I dealing with a pretty traumatized individual who has post-traumatic stress disorder? Am I dealing with someone who's really, really depressed and they are becoming psychotic? Or am I dealing with somebody who has personality disorder, a sociopath, a narcissist, and they are just having a good time creating all this trouble, right? So you want to ask yourself, what am I dealing with, okay? The next reflection question is, what is the trigger here? What is the trigger here? Was it a loss? Was it a transition? Was it jealousy? Another strong emotion? Was it age, right? What is that threshold? What is that thing that created this rut in the middle of the road, right? Because usually when a person becomes delusional and paranoid and they begin to hallucinate or have these really strong bizarre and non-bizarre beliefs, you really need to pause and say, okay, what is it that has stirred this? Drug abuse, substance abuse, domestic violence, trauma, a change in one's life, age, a transition that was a little bit unstable or destabilizing, right? You want to go through these things in your mind so you can get a little bit better of a handle psychologically of what's going on around you with this particular person, especially if it's your parent, okay? The next reflection question is, are they safe? Okay, because you don't want to leave a parent or a loved one on their own when they are struggling in this way, because you're just leaving them to have to deal with maybe law enforcement who do not understand them, maybe 302'd or involuntarily committed without, you even knowing what's going on, right? Because a neighbor could have it done, the police could do it, a psychiatrist or a therapist could do it. So you really want to ask yourself, what am I dealing with here? Like, what is this? And are they safe? What's the trigger, and are they safe? The next one is, what are my options here, right? Because, you're dealing with an adult here. If it's a parent or if it's a family member, can I get them involuntarily committed to a hospital? Can I call the police and have the police do a assessment, right? Or they could do what's called a courtesy house visit, where they just go and knock and they say, I'm just checking on you. Somebody wanted me to check on you. Or, do I need to call mental health crisis hotline and have them go to the house? What are my options here? Can I take this person into my home, my parent? Can I bring them into my home and allow them to live with me? Is that safe, right? So you want to be able to use these reflection questions to kind of look at the whole picture. The more you reflect, the stronger you get. The more you reflect, the more clarity you will get as well. Everything is probably going through your mind if you're dealing with somebody like this, especially if it's a parent and it's a new situation. So you want to make sure that you pause, reflect, and then go from there. This was really tough. I get a lot of people who want suggestions and advice on this. And, this was really an area of burnout for me years ago when I first started, 14 years ago in the field. It was an area of burnout because I didn't realize how many families were dealing with this, parents, spouses, the list just goes on. It's a pretty complicated area. So, I just want to encourage you, take your time, learn as much as you can, stay close to videos like this, and then find a therapist who really gets this area of life. They can really be helpful. Thank you so much for being with me today in this video. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up and go ahead and hit the subscribe button and that bell button so you can stick around with us. I will see you in the next video. I'm going to talk a little bit more about individual delusions, and then I'm going to give you some tips on how to manage this kind of person. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.